So today is Monday, June 17th at 6:50 a.m. I'm going to do the week 6 recording video just describing the process of eating a cheeseburger. So here we go. So usually when you're eating anything, you start by um, putting it in your mouth and chewing it. So instantly when you smell food, that automatically begins to start the secretion of the saliva, which is through the salivary glands. So you put the food in your mouth, you begin to chew it. Chewing is actually the beginning of breaking down food into smaller pieces so that it can be swallowed and absorbed throughout the body. As you begin to chew the food, um, again, your salivary glands begin to secrete saliva, which contains enzymes that are going to begin the breakdown of the food into a form that your body could absorb. Begin to absorb for the nutrients in the food. So the food is then moved from your mouth into the pharynx. The pharynx receives the food, and then the pharynx is where swallowing takes place. Okay. Then food is moved from the pharynx through the to the esophagus. Okay, the esophagus is what is going to carry the food to the stomach, into the trachea, into the lungs. Okay, this is done by contractions called peristalsis. Okay, so in the esophagus, so food again, we begin to chew it in our mouth. Once we are chewing, that begins the salivary glands to secrete saliva, which contains enzymes to begin to help break the food down. It then is moved into the pharynx. From the pharynx receives the food and it goes to the esophagus through us swallowing the food. The esophagus contains the esophageal sphincter, which is what opens to allow the food to go to the stomach, and then that sphincter closes to keep the food from back flowing back up. So, in the esophagus, you have the esophageal sphincter, which allows the food to go to the stomach, and then it closes to keep the food from going back out, back flowing. The stomach secretes acid and enzymes which continue the breakdown of food. In the stomach, the food is changing from a solid form to a liquid form. Okay, so and that is done by the secreting of the acid in the stomach and the enzymes. The food is then the cheeseburger, I guess we're going to say, is going to go to the small intestine. The small intestine is where most primarily the breakdown and the breakdown of food occurs, and the absorption of the nutrients take place. Okay, in the small intestines, the enzymes that are released from the pancreas and bile from the liver is what helps the breakdown of foods in the intestine. Again, like I said, most of the breakdown takes place in the small intestine, and most of the nutrients are absorbed in the small intestines. Okay. And once our nutrients are absorbed, the leftover, which is the waste, which is eventually what we comes out of our body through bowel movement, that waste is going to be moved to the large intestine or the colon. In the large intestine or the colon is where the mostly water is absorbed, and then moving again. This the water is absorbed, and then now we're going to beginning to have some solid. The stool is going to be stored in the sigmoid, and once the stool is stored in the sigmoid, it then empties into the rectum. It usually takes about 36 hours for this total process. And then once the waste is moved to the rectum, Their signals sent to our brain, which causes us to defecate that stool. So that is the process of eating and digesting and getting waste out of our body.